next topic, inequality. This topic has many definitions and has been relevant in society for centuries. Here, we will be talking about its manifestation in our very own country. And together, we will discuss, is it good, bad, or something else? Our speakers for tonight, and this is an updated order, as it says differently in the program. We will have Dustin Burkhart, Oluchi Ukairo, Ms. Jessica Bowen, and Dr. Anders Lewis.
Our first speaker for tonight is Dustin Burkhart.
I'd like to start by sharing a story with you all. It's called Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. The story takes place in 2081 in the United States, where laws have been enacted to enforce equality. No one is allowed to be smarter, stronger, more athletic, more attractive, more anything than anyone else. And to enforce this, people are handicapped. Smart people have earpieces that send noise to disrupt their thoughts. Strong people wear weights, pretty people wear masks. You get the idea. The story opens on Harrison's parents, George and Hazel, watching TV. The show is interrupted by a news broadcast saying that Harrison, who is an athlete and a genius, has escaped prison and is trying to bring down the government. Suddenly, Harrison breaks into the studio and declares himself the emperor, tearing off the handicaps of the people there. George momentarily recognizes his son before his thoughts are interrupted by the noise in his earpiece. Harrison chooses one of the ballerinas who was on the dancing show that was on TV and declares her his empress before the two of them dance and kiss. Their moment is cut short, though, when the lady in charge of enforcing all of these handicaps that the government enforces breaks into the studio and uses a shotgun to kill both Harrison and his empress. George looks at Hazel and asks why she's crying, but she doesn't remember, and the two of them return to their average lives. Now, why do I bring this story up? That's because it is a very scary depiction of an equal society. The two major takeaways that I see from it are, first, that in order to make people equal, they must be brought down. See, the weak can't be made stronger, and the dumb can't be made smarter. But the strong can be made weaker, and the smart can be made dumber. Instead, the people who are, excel at things are brought down to the base level in order to enforce equality. The second is how an equal society functions. See, when everyone is equal, individual characteristics lose value. The ballerinas aren't admired anymore because anyone can dance as well as them. The news anchor is just as good at talking as everyone else. And the government has effectively eliminated all competition by bringing everyone to a baseline. George himself expresses it best while considering whether he should take off his earpiece or his weights to get some relief. He says, if I try to get away with it, then other people would get away with it. And pretty soon, we'd be right back to the Dark Ages again, with everybody competing against everyone else. In an equal society, no one can compete against anyone, and therein lies the problem. See, inequality is actually an incentive to work hard. When you have an unequal society, that means that some people can be better than others, and the way to achieve that is through hard work, through competition. I've been taking economics this year. One of the first principles that we learn in economics is that people respond to incentives in predictable ways. If, for example, you say that by working hard, you can earn money and be part of the upper class, then people are going to want hard to earn that money. If they don't work hard, then they have the negative incentive of not having enough money and falling into poverty. Because of this inequality that's set up here, people have a reason to want to work hard, to want to compete, and to want to better themselves. Without inequality, there's no reason for competition. It's like a competition or a sports game where everyone gets a participation award and they're all the exact same. There's no reason to work for first place because why work for first place where you can get the exact same merits by coming in last and doing nothing? Competition is what leads to the innovation and progress that we see within our society. New ideas and new developing technologies all come from the fact that inequality inspires competition. In the year 2000, a plasma flat screen TV cost $20,000. Nowadays, how many people have one in their home? Well, high definition TV. Yeah. I assume a lot of you have, at least a nice TV. The same TV that cost $20,000 in 2000 now only costs $550, and that is only made possible through innovation caused by competition. If all of these people are made equal, then no one wants to produce the best product, because why make the best product when you can just make something mediocre and get a decent return on your money and still end up the same as someone who put a lot of effort in and has a lot of money. There's no reason to compete without an incentive behind it, and that incentive is the fact that you can make money. Not only do you think the TVs are an example of how luxury goods become common goods through competition. Things that were once considered impossible for everyday people to have now are things that every single person has in their home and can't imagine living without. 50 years ago, the idea of a smartphone would have been insane to anyone who heard of it. But now, everyone has a computer in their pocket, and these things are made possible because there is a reason to work hard to create new things. When companies see that there is another company working to make a similar product, then they have an incentive to make their product better, because if they don't, then their customers will move over to the other company. They want to make as much money as possible because money and the inequality that comes from different levels of income is the incentive for competition. We see how competition works throughout society and promotes the innovation and new ideas that push our societies forward all throughout history. For example, Edison and Tesla were fierce rivals, and they constantly worked to try and achieve many of the same goals, but the reason why they were able to do it is because they were competing with each other. They felt an urgency and a need to produce a better product and the product sooner, for fear that if they didn't, the other person would seize the market and take all of their opportunity, take their fame. Not only that, but the space race is another fantastic example of how inequality leads to innovation. Now, communist Russia is a very good example of an equal society, but the fact that they were able to create so many fantastic inventions during the space race didn't come from the competition within the society, because there was none. Instead, that competition comes from the United States. The United States and Russia were fierce rivals, and the fact that they wanted to have the power, they wanted to be the superior country, led them to work hard on their innovations. This rivalry and this competition is what allowed us to go to the moon. It's what allowed us to create the space station and see so many amazing inventions that would not have been possible without competition. Now, of course, there are people that are have different skills than others. But a society would not be able to function without a working class. In The Incredibles, Syndrome says, if everyone is super, then no one is. And that quote really kind of sums up why inequality is important. See, not everyone can be Elon Musk. Not everyone can be Steve Jobs. Because if everyone was those people, then there would be no actual value behind the work they do. We need the people that are the working class. We need the plumbers. We need the teachers. We need all sorts of roles in society filled in order for society to function in the first place. If you're sick, you go see a doctor, or if you need your sink fixed, you go see a plumber, because those people have specialized skills that allow them to do what they do best. Yes, maybe you could try and fix your broken leg at home on your own, but that's not going to be the same treatment that you get if you go to someone who actually knows how to deal with a broken leg. Capitalism is built upon this foundational idea of inequality because capitalism says that if you work hard, you can make it. By allowing us to get money from our own hard work, then we are able to create new things, to have new ideas, to have new innovations, because there is a reason and an incentive behind it. Now, that's all great, but where's like the data to back it up? Well, I have some data. Let's look at some progress that humanity has taken over the last period, like 50 years or so. First off, this is an example of, this is a graph of computer parts. On the bottom axis is the year, from the 1900s to 2010. And on the y-axis we have how many calculations can be done per $1,000. As you see, the graph is sloping up continuously. And that's because, over time, we've been able to improve our computers and lead them to be able to be more powerful, to be stuff that we can have in our pockets and do calculations that would have been able to send us to the moon 50 years ago. Next up, this is a graph of the world GDP adjusted for inflation over the last 2 millennia. Now, GDP has many flaws, but it is a very good way of measuring economic growth. And as you can see, it has a massive spike recently. This is because society has had major economic growth, has had major improvement over this course of time. But we're talking about, a large portion of this night is to be talking about American equality, and this is the world. So, wait, actually, sorry, I don't have the American one, never mind. But America also has the same upward sloping trend. I forgot that I could put it up. This is a really interesting graph, because this was taken from polling people with their dissatisfaction with their standard of living, graph versus GDP per capita. GDP per capita is GDP divided by the number of people within the country. So as you can see, people that have a very low GDP per capita, meaning that there is either a large amount of people or a very small GDP, something that leads to each person having a very small amount of money. Those countries have a very high percentage of dissatisfaction with their standard of living, whereas people that are happier with their standard of living have a higher GDP. This shows that as GDP has grown, so does the satisfaction with living. And GDP has grown recently, meaning that we have, once again, had progress. This is a graph of income inequality, which is on the x-axis, and on the y-axis, hang on one second. On the y-axis is the average growth in GDP, right? Yeah. The y-axis is GDP per capita once again, and the x-axis is the income inequality. So, as income inequality increases, we see that there is a change in the GDP per capita, and it starts to fall lower, not higher. The higher GDP per capita is on the left side. And what's really interesting is that if we look at the poverty level across the entire world, we see that poverty has fallen massively over the past just 20 years. And that's projected to fall even further in the next 10 years. As poverty has fallen, this improves the standard of living for more and more people. Now, what's interesting is, though, many people say that the middle class is disappearing, and that is true, but the middle class isn't becoming more impoverished. As we saw, the poverty level is falling. Instead, the middle class is disappearing into the upper class. The upper class has grown nearly 20% in the last 50 years. What do all these things tell us? Well, this data tells us that humanity is progressing. There is major levels of progress in technology, in reducing poverty, in standard of living. All of these things are indicators that humanity is progressing. And why is that? It's because there is incentive to progress. As capitalism has spread across the world and more countries become industrialized, we have a reason to want to work hard, then we see that these societies can progress. Thank you very much.
All right, I just want to say thank you so much to Dustin Burkhart. That was incredible. Up next, we're going to have Oluchi, and she will be speaking right now.
Hello everyone. As I said, my name is Oluchi, and I'm a senior. And today I want to talk about the racial divide, the racial breakdown of economic inequality in America. So before we begin, I just want to begin by establishing a few of the sources that I used throughout my presentation. While I did try to make sure all my sources were quite current, my earliest source does go back to 2017. All right, so let's begin. If we look at the graphs here, we can see that there is a big disparity between the white mean and median income between white, Hispanic, and Latino, white, black, and Hispanic races. I won't actually be looking at the mean today because if you think about the average, those high percentages will pull up that average and isn't a complete accurate representation of the average black, Latino, and white family as well. So if we go on to the next slide, we can actually see the breakdown of the median wealth and what the black family owns. The black family owns a mere 9.5% of white wealth, while the Hispanic family owns a mere 14% of the wealth of the median white family. And again, it's important to remember that we are discussing median throughout this presentation and not the mean. So let's discuss some of these effects, because there are plenty of effects of income inequality in America today. Again, also, we can also look at income as well. Income, obviously, there is a great disparity, and Dustin did touch upon it as well. But I want to focus on the mean wealth in America today. So what are some effects of income inequality? Education limitations. The amount that somebody is bringing in affects greatly how much they can spend and invest into money. As we all know, university is very, very expensive in America. This also limits the resources that they have available to them as well. Increased crime rates. There's a heavy positive association between income inequality and crime rates in America, and we'll actually take a look at that in the next slide. Lastly, healthcare. Health insurance is expensive, and not everyone can afford healthcare, unfortunately, in America. So that's one of the big effects on minority groups that income inequality has in America. So this comes back to the increase in crime rates. If we look at the blue bar graph here, which represents youths from low-income families, we can see that they're more likely to be involved in violence, gangs. They may be more likely to use drugs, sell drugs. So these are all very, very important effects that we need to consider when looking at income inequality. But of course, in order to hold true to these statistics, we need to make sure that we also look at some of the underlying factors that it might not always be a racial issue. Location plays a big role in this as well. So where somebody lives can affect how much they're making, and that's something that we're going to discuss later. Family life. Statistically speaking, people who grow up in a single-parent household tend to make less when they grow up later as well. Why that is can be discussed further. I only have 10 minutes. So, but that's just, statistically speaking, that's just how it is. And then education history, where somebody went to school, how many degrees somebody has, all plays into how much money somebody will make. So let's discuss the history. Why are we seeing such economic disparity? Well, about 50 years after slavery was abolished, the government set up what is known as exclusionary zoning laws, better known as redlining. This allowed for them to still segregate housing and prevent the sale of housing to specific racial groups. Later, these exclusionary zoning laws were banned. However, agreements were made between property owners to still not give out loans and still not sell specific properties to specific groups. So actually, we're going to take a look at a map now, which this is from South Boston in about 1940. The red zones were considered hazardous areas. The yellow zones are considered declining. The green zones were considered highly desirable, while the blue zones were considered still desirable. And these green and blue zones were where the government highly invested their money into. If we think about what we see in modern times, those red and yellow zones are more so the projects and ghettos that we discussed today, heavily affected by redlining. So it's important to remember that redlining is more than just the segregation of housing. Redlining was also how much money the government wanted to invest in specific locations. So this causes a domino effect of rents. Decreased lack of investment in specific areas leads to decreased quality of basic goods and services, decreased healthcare and how much money you can invest in healthcare, as I stated before, and then education. Education, personally, is one of the big factors that I want to consider today in this presentation. Education services are poorer in these communities. And then lack of job opportunities in these red zones that we saw, which in turn leads to overall lower pay for people who live in those areas. So redlining is not something of the past. It's very prevalent today. The effects of redlining are still very prevalent in today's society. This is actually grabbed from what is called the Opportunity Atlas, which shows you the breakdown of median income across America. So I chose these three locations: Detroit, Michigan, which is known to have a very high black population; Seattle, Washington, which is known to have a very high white population; and San Antonio, Texas, known to have a very high Hispanic population, but it is still one of the more mixed areas that we have up here. So if we look at the map, Detroit, Michigan, as I said before, heavily black population, has a median income of about $29,000. While Seattle, Washington is looking at $85,000, and San Antonio, Texas is looking at $50,000. So obviously we can go back and we can see that the disparity too, even in 2020, not 2019, is still very, very big. So it's important to remember that the effects of redlining, we're still seeing them today. And that's if you wanted to check out the Opportunity Atlas. I can come back to this later. So let's discuss education. If we hone in on the education aspect of economic inequality, we see that predominantly white school districts receive a lot more funding than districts with students of color. And by a lot more funding, I mean $23 billion more funding than districts with predominantly students of color. This prevents a lot of things for school districts, resources that they can provide to their students being one of them. So we can definitely see that redlining has a big effect, a compound effect, on education as well. Today we see things like affirmative action being put into place to try and level the playing field for people who are oppressed, and trying to make more equal the inequality of opportunity that's presented by the education. And lastly, of course, like any other data points, there are a few outlying factors, and I'm just going to leave you guys with this one. The Census Bureau has shown that Black women who grew up under the same family income as that of the average white woman are currently actually outperforming white women in these areas. Of course, it's possible for this to happen, but it's said that only under the circumstance that Black women have the same conditions as white women. So the question we have to ask is, why is it that people who don't have these same exact conditions, why aren't they also doing as well as the average white woman? We didn't really discuss gender today. Obviously, that's another thing that you could go into and explore. But this is just one more factor that we have to consider and ask why. Why is this happening? So thank you.
Thank you, Oluchi. Race inequality in our country is a very important discussion for our time, so I'm glad you brought that up. Also, we have 8 seats up here, which are waiting to be sat on, so if anyone wants to come up, they're available. Our next speaker for tonight is going to be Ms. Bowen. She's our school's AP Macroeconomics teacher and AP Government teacher.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank the Diderot Society for inviting me tonight. Also, I have to say, I'm just so proud of these 2 student speakers, both of whom I've had as macro students, and by the way, both as chorus students. So I'm just super proud. I think you guys did a fabulous, fabulous job, and I'm sorry I have to follow you up, because they're probably going to make me look bad. All right, item number 2, I'm not really good at staying in one place. so I'm going to try and walk around a little bit. Oh, look, there's me. All right, so I'm going to talk tonight about income inequality, and I know the theme of the evening was whether income inequality is good or bad or something else. And for me, I think that income inequality is more of a neutral. It's probably not neither good nor bad. I'm certainly not pro-equality or I'm not pro-inequality. Down with the poor. That's not a position I'm trying to take here. But that rather, when we use income inequality to guide our discussions and are looking to figure out solutions to the problems of our world, that income inequality is a terrible, terrible way to figure out if things are working, if things are good, if things are bad, if things are not working. So a little bit of mine is going to overlap some of Dustin's. Dustin took a couple of my slides, but that's okay. That's what I want to talk about tonight. So I'd like you all to start by imagining a magic lamp. We have a genie. The genie is going to come out, and I would like you all to see if you will take this deal. The genie will wave a wand or do some magic, and you are 10% better off in every aspect. You are 10% wealthier. That's it. That's the deal. Raise your hand if you're willing to take that deal.
There's another one.
There's no other. That's it. That's it. Would you like, if we could just make a wish, if you could make a wish and you are just 10% more prosperous, 10% wealthier, 10% richer, whatever word you want to put in there, would you take the deal? Most of us like it. How come I can't just be 10%? I just want 1 million. Why do people get so much? I just want 1. Now imagine the same lamp comes out and says, same deal. You're 10% richer, but everybody else is 25% richer. You are better off. You're better off. You're 10%, you're making more money, you're buying more stuff, you're sending your kids to better schools, you don't have to buy the dollar menu at McDonald's, you're buying like the good stuff.
Five Guys.
Going to the Five Guys. Now are you going to take the deal? You're 10% better off, everybody else is 25% better off. Let me see your hands.
The only deal?
That's the only deal. You're still taking it, Mr. Rocky. Yeah. Is my genie creepy? Sorry. So, here's the issue with income inequality. What it masks for us is that we're not really talking about, am I better off? With income inequality, we are talking about, am I better off more than that guy? And that's really problematic because it masks what can really be happening. It can mask some real successes and progresses that we're having. So your relative wealth is less important when you come down to it than what everybody else is doing. So this map here of the United States shows the percent of housing units lacking complete plumbing facilities. And even in the darkest area, which is the worst one you can get, the number of households in America that lack indoor plumbing in the poorest areas of America is at 1.25%. What I am telling you and showing you a little bit of toilet humor here is that just by being in America in the year 2020, you are already better off than 99% of human beings that have ever lived. You have running water. You just turn a thing and hot water and cold water comes out and you push a button and your poop goes away and you don't have to think about it anymore. Queen Elizabeth in the 16th century doesn't have that. You are better off. The progress that we have made is for everybody. We are to a point where almost everybody in the United States is living at a standard of luxury that was unimaginable to all of humanity 100 years ago. Here's some 9 facts about how the poor in America live in the United States. This is not poverty in the world. I recognize that, and I'm not trying to minimize the effects of poverty or to say, poverty's pretty good, you guys should take it up. 9 facts about how the poor live in America. Nearly 75% have a car. I don't know how well you can see this. 92% have a microwave. 1 in 7 have more than 2 computers. So there's some facts here that as we have had progress, even the very poor among us, our standards of living have increased. And if we focus on what somebody else has more than the others, we can kind of miss this. Here's what's really important. Are you living more? Are you living better? This shows life expectancy. As GDP, Dustin showed a similar graph here, shows the massive increase in GDP. And as both of my economics students would tell you, GDP is a measure of how much stuff a country makes, how many goods and services we make. And it's a measurement that economists often use to measure the wealth of a country. This is GDP per capita, and as this spikes up, look what else spikes up, your life expectancy. You're living longer. We're all living longer, and we're flushing our toilets. And those things are connected. We have access to clean water. Let me ask you another question. Would you trade a brick of ramen, the delicious kind, for a new iPhone? Raise your hand if you would trade a brick of ramen for a new iPhone. Again, this is a good deal, people. If you haven't raised your hand, I'm unsure whether your love of ramen is that intense or your dislike of phones. If you met somebody who had tons and tons of ramen, and they had traded it for phones, what would you think of that person? They're rich? They have a lot of ramen. Most of us would trade ramen for a phone, and that is because we value the phone more than the ramen. Here's another reason why focusing on wealth or income inequality can be a little bit deceptive. When we purchase something, we are voluntarily giving up something which we value less to obtain something we value more. That is at the heart of what money is for us. And if you're not using ramen and you're using dollars, first of all, that's probably a good job. But you gave up $1 to get an iPhone because the iPhone was worth more to you than the dollar. Or whatever, how much are they going for? How many dollars? How much is an iPhone?
Like a new one to $1,200.
$1,200.
That's crazy.
Somebody out there said this iPhone is worth more than $1,200. If somebody has a lot of dollars, if Steve Jobs died with $8 billion, that is because he gave up iPhones which other people wanted and gave their dollars for them. He has something that people value less than the products that they have. And when we look at income inequality, we look at the dollars and we often miss the fact that those dollars were exchanged for something. Steve Jobs didn't steal my money. Steve Jobs didn't beat me up and take my money. He didn't show up with a gun and say, "Give me all of your teacher's salary, Mrs. Bowen." He said, "I have something better for you. You sure would like this iPhone." And I said, "Ooh, I would. And I can crush candy all day on my iPhone." Thanks, Steve Jobs. 9 out of the 10 richest people in the world are self-made entrepreneurs. That means that they have a lot of money, and we look at them, and we're jealous, and we're like, I would like their millions and billions. They got their millions and billions because they offered you something that you voluntarily gave up money for. If you die with $8 billion, we are saying, society is saying, you have produced that much value in our society. If you have a situation where the number 4, the blank one, is the only one on the list, Bernard Arnault of Louis Vuitton. So if you're buying fancy purses, maybe not so much. But all of these people were not born wealthy. They did not inherit their money from their parents. They did not steal it. They earned it by offering something that we value and that we voluntarily gave up. So if we want people to continue to give us things that we want, we need to provide a system where we can reward those with things of value. And if we say, you have too much money, we're going to take away your money, we reduce the incentive for people to provide us things with iPhones and nice purses and Facebook and Google and all of these other things. Amazon. I probably got 6 packages waiting at home for me. I can't stop shopping on the Amazon.
It's too easy.
Here's another thing about income inequality that we can miss. Any good? There's a lot of grown-ups. Nice job, grown-ups, coming out tonight. Anybody want to think back to your first apartment that you had right out of your first grown-up apartment? My husband came tonight. I'm just thinking of our first apartment. Our first apartment was so small that you could sit on, now I'm going to go back to the bathroom. You could sit on the toilet, you could soak your feet in the tub, and you could wash your hands in the sink all at the same time. The kitchen was...
Efficiency.
It was tiny. It was tiny. When you're 20, you're generally at the lowest point of your income earning life. You start off poor, you got student loans, you got a crappy tiny apartment. You're hoping at the end of the week you have enough money for cat food for that lonely cat that you have with you. As you go on in your life, you make more money, you invest in yourself, you get a better job, you demonstrate your value to society. You probably peak in your earning potential somewhere in your 50s. Finally get rid of those crumb-grabbing kids, send them away, start putting the bank in there. And then you save up until the point where you retire at 65. That's probably about the most wealthy you're going to be. And you retire and you start living off of that wealth. Right? So if you picture just a little bit of a bar graph of your life of earning. When we look at income inequality, we say there's a big gap. Some people have lots of money. Some people only have a little bit of money. But what we miss is that I might have a lot of money right now, but 30 years ago, I didn't have any money. And that income inequality as a snapshot takes a look and sees that there's a lot of inequality, but it misses the fact that over our lifetimes, all of us are likely to be both poor at some points in our lives and wealthy at relatively wealthy at a point in their lives. Hopefully, those of you who are grown-ups are living in nicer apartments than you did when you were 20. Not everybody, I'm sure. But when we look at this snapshot of income in time, we miss the mobility. Economists often divide the economy into quintiles, each 20%, and most of us will be in 4 out of the 5 quintiles in our lifetime. If you start in the lowest quintile, this is the amount of wealth held by each of the quintiles. So the lowest quintile holds about 20% of the country's wealth, and then this is the top quintile. They own a lot of wealth. Right now, we're in a point in American history where the baby boomers are retiring. They are at their most highest wealth portion. And so we have and they're the biggest demographic that we have. That's why we call them the baby boomers. There's a ton of them. So it makes sense right now in the United States that income inequality is a little bit magnified because we have a very large generation of people who are at the peak wealth or earning that they're going to have in their lifetimes. So it's a distortion of the look in time if you're looking at income inequality that you can miss. There's inequality right now, but equality over time. Most of us are going to go through many of these quintiles. Okay? This is a very similar graph to the one Dustin showed, that people are concerned. It's scary out there. It seems like the middle class is shrinking. It feels like it's getting harder. This is dividing into thirds. Household incomes in the United States. This is in 2018 constant dollars. Households earning less than $50,000, households earning a middle class $50,000 to $99,000, and households earning $100,000. You can find lots of different versions of this graph and kind of how you decide who counts as middle class and who doesn't. But the data is pretty clear that the middle class is shrinking, and it is shrinking because we are losing spots of the lowest households and middle households, and that the wealthiest Americans are gaining. We have that bottom line here. Households earning over $100,000, this is adjusted for inflation, is increasing. Dustin made this point too. I think it's really, really well taken, Dustin. I loved your story. I gotta go read that. We can have equality. It's actually not that hard. We can say, listen, everybody, nobody has everything. Everyone is equally poor. Instant equality. What we really need to do is ask ourselves if that's actually the goal that we want. It's very unfair that some people are tall and statuesque and I am short and dumpy. It's a
gross injustice. I would be such a great willowy tall model, but I'm not. Should we just have to go along and cut everybody else's legs off so everybody is 5'2" like me? That's obviously a ridiculous situation. Nobody's going to want that. Equality can come, and it comes at a cost. It's a trade-off. In economics, we talk about trade-offs. The trade-off to make everybody equal is probably a greater trade-off than we're willing to accept. This is a party that somebody threw. I don't know if you can really kind of see it, but they made everybody the same height by making people wear ridiculously tall shoes. The shoes I would need to have a conversation with Dr. Lewis would be, I would need these very, very silly ones here. And then people walking around on those little romper stompers. This is a map that shows economists measure income inequality on something called the Gini coefficient. And what this shows is an inequality possibility frontier. And what you can't see right here, but this is England and Wales over time. And you can see that at different time periods, the income inequality has increased. But that it is not a particularly good measure of the health of the economy. I'm going to show that a little bit better here in a minute. Here's countries with a low Gini index and countries with a high Gini index. You have a low Gini index, you have a low amount of income inequality. People in your country are their incomes are relatively equal. And then countries with a very high Gini index, there's a lot of income inequality here. And it is possible. You can look here and you see, I have a laser. You can see these red countries. They have a very high inequality, and these are some of the poorer areas of the world. But it's not a one-to-one match. Some of the most equal countries are actually just about as equal as some very rich equal countries and some very poor countries. And you can see here, I've put a list, it's a little bit difficult to see and I apologize, of all of the countries in the world that have a Gini index of less than 30, which means they're pretty equal. I've also put on the bottom the United States for references of 45, and then South Africa, which is one of the highest, is at 62.5. In the second column, they're ranking in GDP in the world. So out of, I think, 190-ish countries, you can see, for instance, the country of Moldova is 134th of the wealthiest countries in the world. It's very low on the bottom, but it's very equal. And then also you see on the list a country like Norway, which is 8th in the world in GDP in terms of national wealth, is also equal. So if you are trying to measure how wealthy are the country, how wealthy are the people in this country, how wealthy is this country, inequality is not going to give you that answer. It's not a great measure. There are some correlations, but it's not a great one, and there are better ones. When we focus on inequality, the problem is we miss a real opportunity, and that is, the real problem is poverty. And that is a problem that this world can solve. It is not a pipe dream to solve poverty. The World Bank has set a goal of eliminating poverty, and this is since 1820. People who live in poverty, people who live not in extreme poverty. The World Bank describes that as under $2 a day, and that is constant dollars. We can see that this has fallen off tremendously. The number of people in the world who live on less than $2 a day has dropped dramatically in the last century and even in the last 20 years. We are on the brink of eliminating extreme poverty. And what we really need to ask is not, is it because there's equality or inequality, but what are the economic systems that are letting us eliminate poverty? That's what we need. And unequivocally, countries that have economic systems that rely on free markets do a better job of eliminating poverty. They might not do a good job of eliminating inequality. They might not. There's a chart of poverty around the world, and you can see that the blue countries have less than 2% of people in their country living in extreme poverty. I'm going to leave you with this. You didn't give me a little signal like you did the kids. Am I way over 10 minutes?
I was trying to be respectful because you're an adult.
Mistake number one. The duty of pulling the extreme poor out of misery and the duty to share the wealth evenly are not of the same order. The former is a duty of emergency. The latter is a duty of convenience. Indeed, when every man is provided with the real necessities, the bread, the shelter, and the book, the distribution of luxury does not matter. Who on earth should care about the distribution of golden faucets and glittering bathrooms? Oh, I had the other one, Mr. Hill, and I sent you the, oh, did you go? Wait.
Did I not?
I updated this. The last quote I want to give you, I sent it on a late slide, I'm sorry, is this. Is this still on? It's just
Oh, no, you
the
shut down.
Oscar music just played off. Just played off.
I think it just ran out of battery.
That's how much I talk, I ran the batteries out. Economic systems are used to create wealth. Political systems are created to ensure justice. When we use economic systems to try and get justice, we get neither wealth nor justice. And that's not my quote, I did send it in. That's a quote of an American economist. But thank you all very much. That's how I
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Bowen. I was getting flashbacks to my AP macro class, but
Flashbacks, you were there 5
yeah,
hours
I know,
ago.
right? But no, she teaches us so much about economics, personal financing, even just random tangents about life lessons. So we really appreciate you speaking today. Up next, we're gonna have Dr. Anders Lewis.
All right, excellent. So I'm going to try to speak without a microphone. I hate podiums and I hate microphones. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, if you can't hear me, just shout or throw a tomato or something. No, it's okay. Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. So as I was listening to Lulu and Dustin and Ms. Bowen, I was thinking to myself, this is like a real live, right now, example of inequality. Because I cannot match what was just said. I was truly, truly inspired by Dustin and Lulu. I just thought, you guys are terrific. You will be leaders. Those were really awesome presentations that you guys gave. Very, very impressive. And that is the purpose of the Diderot Society. So very impressive. And thank you, Ms. Bowen. And thank you, all of you, for coming and participating in tonight's event. So I'm going to present a story. I'm going to tell you a story. And I'm going to ask you a question. Very important question. The question is, will you push the button? This is the question. So this story that I'm going to tell you is inspired by that man right there. Does anybody just out of the blue know? Not you. Does anybody out of the, not you? Anybody from this section? Anybody know who that is by any chance? Fairly obscure individual. His name was John Rawls. He was a philosopher at, you knew it, Nikita? Oh, awesome, terrific. I knew it. That is John Rawls. You knew? Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah, I told him. Mr. Murphy is an expert on the answers after they've been revealed.
John Rawls was a philosopher at Harvard University. In 1971, he wrote a very, very famous book called A Theory of Justice. Very influential, that really changed the world of philosophy, and it has the potential to change America and the world. So I'm not really going to talk much about his ideas and his philosophy. I'm just going to present you a story very much in the mode of what John Rawls does in his book. So hopefully everybody has a copy, or you're close to a copy of this document.
It appears that you underestimated.
I made like 50 copies. I don't think we have enough. If you don't have a copy, you can share. Oh.
That's an Amber Alert, just so people are getting that.
Let me see if my kids are okay.
So if you don't have a copy, you can just share with your next door neighbor. So here's the goal. So I'm going to tell you all a story, and I'm going to describe to you a civilization. That civilization is Civilization X. So listen to the story and read along as you please. And then when we get to the end of the story, I'm going to ask you one question. And that one question is, will you press the button? And the button that you press will transport you right to Civilization X. So as you're thinking about the story, think about one really important question. And that really important question is the society described in, I feel like it's an alien invasion. Ladies and gentlemen, they have arrived. So think to yourself, is what is being described in your mind, is it just? Not so much is it legal, is it just? And then ask yourself, will you press that button and will you transport yourself into this civilization? So, and here is a really, really big caveat. This is the most important caveat. This comes right from John Rawls. Before you press the button, you have absolutely no knowledge of your role in this society. You have no idea who you're going to be. So I'm going to describe to you a business. I'm going to describe to you a business person. I'm going to describe to you various roles played by various people. You don't know who you will be. You're going to decide, do I press this button? You might be the owner of this business. You might be person Z. And as you shall see, person Z does pretty well. You could also be a manager for person Z. They do pretty well. You could be a consumer who buys products from person Z. They do okay, I suppose. You could be someone who works as a working class individual for person Z. You could be a small business person who is driven out of business by person Z. You do not know your place, right? So you have to decide at the end of this scenario, do I press that button and say, yeah, sure, I will do that. I might be person Z. Or might you hesitate because you might be one of the worker who works for person Z? Might you hesitate because you might be a small business person who is driven out of business by person Z? Okay, so if you flip the page, you flip to page 2. I'm going to describe to you 5 things that you need to know before you make your decision about civilization X and whether you press that button. So here are 5 things. Thing 1, many years ago in civilization X, person Z got an idea about how to build a business. It was pretty much Z's idea, although he borrowed from other folks. He listened to other folks. He studied other folks. He examined the way they did things. And he took some of their ideas, but it was pretty much his idea. That's thing 1. Thing number 2, to build his business, Z worked very, very hard. He got up really early in the morning. He worked through the day. He worked through the evening. 365 days. This guy he was a beast. He worked incredibly hard. Nobody ever questioned his work ethic. Worked incredibly hard. That's thing 2. So it's his idea. He works incredibly hard. Thing number 3, as Z was building his business, the business caught on. He was doing quite well. He began to make some money. And as he began to make money, his business grew. And within civilization X, Z's business expanded from one region to another region, to another region, to another region, to another region. And soon enough, person Z's business was all over civilization X. You couldn't go to one place and not see the remains or the evidence of person Z's business. It was all over the place. Incredibly successful. All right, now we get to the heart of the matter. Thing 2. So it's his idea. He works really hard. He is very successful. And as Z is doing this, as he's building his business, he realizes 2 really important things. The first thing that he realizes is that he faces a lot of tough competition. So Dustin talked a lot about competition in his fantastic presentation. Ms. Bowen talked about the importance of competition. And Z absolutely agreed. He faced a lot of tough competition, so he realized if I'm going to be successful, I need to keep prices low. Folks ain't going to come in my store unless I keep prices low. I got to keep prices low. Low, low, low. All the time. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Low prices. So the question became, how do I keep my prices low? I've got to keep them low. So he does it he did it in a number of ways. One way, the first way he does it, is he uses the latest technology to keep track of everything he sold and everything he did not sell. He was on top of every single item in all his stores, and he told his managers, you had better be on top of all your items in all your stores. What's in, what's selling, what's not selling. Data, 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 data. And he's going to get that data and he's going to use that data. Knowledge and efficiency, as he said, are the keys to a successful business. Knowledge and efficiency. So that was one way. A second way that Z sought to keep prices low is that he wanted to make sure that his products, they're coming again, the second invasion. So he wanted to make sure that his products were were made as cheaply as possible. And this required Z to search out labor in many places far away from civilization X. So Z scoured the world. He went to countries that had fewer rules. He went to countries that had fewer rules about how you treat your workers. He went to countries that had fewer rules about how you pay your workers. That was okay to Z because he wanted to make sure that prices were low. So he'd go anywhere he could get cheap labor. Much cheaper than Civilization X to make his products that he sold. So that was another way that Z made sure that his products were very, very cheap. To keep prices low, here's a third method. Z also made sure that the wages he paid to his employees, the workers who worked in his shops, were as low or as close to low as legally possible. And he made sure that his workers did not receive any guaranteed pensions. No guaranteed pensions. And he would say, we are in the business of business, he would say. We are not in the business of providing for the lifelong security of our workers. No pensions, low wages. So that's a third thing that he did. A fourth thing that he did, to keep prices low, Z also made sure that his workers would never, ever, on God's green earth, ever be able to form an organization, such as a union, to represent them and to fight for higher wages, to fight for dignity in the workplace, to fight for better working conditions. We're not going to allow that, Z said. And when some workers in some of his places of business talked about organizing a union, whispered about organizing a union, got together at lunch to talk about organizing a union, Z would call the workers into his office, or have his managers call the workers into his office and say, hey, I hear you talking about a union. You want a job tomorrow? You want employment? You better stop talking about that union, because you ain't going to be working here if you're talking about a union. Z would say, we're family. We are family. And I don't need any outside group of wild-eyed agitators telling me how to run my business. I'm going to run my business. I work hard. This is my idea. So, those were the ways that Z sought to keep his prices low, and the strategy worked. The strategies worked. So he kept prices low, and as he did, he drove out competition. Every single day, more and more in town after town, state after state, city after city, people poured into his stores. With low prices, these incredibly low prices, he drove out one business after another, one store after another. Just drove them out. See you later. Bye-bye. So Z had critics. We'll talk a little bit more about his critics. He had critics, and these critics said, hey, Z, you're destroying mom and pop stores. You're destroying little businesses. Businesses that have been around a long time. Businesses that provide a little bit of culture and individuality and give a little flavor to towns. You're driving them all out, right? And Z said, blah, blah, blah. It's all about choice. It's all about freedom. People making choices to come to my store. They're not making choices to go to mom and pop stores. Goodbye, mom and pop stores. So, Z did not want to be thought of as a bad guy. Who wants to be thought of as a bad guy? He wants to be thought of as a good guy. And he also realized that you can't just be harsh. You can't just threaten workers to drive out their unions, right? So you need your workers. You want your workers to be spirited. You want your workers to be happy. You want your workers to be devoted. You want your workers to come to work each and every day with a smile on their face and feel good about what they're doing and not question what Z's doing up there in that big office, right? So this was his second big realization. So Z every day preached about the importance of being positive. Z preached about the importance of having a can-do attitude. Everyone's got to have a can-do attitude. Here's everyone smile. You give out stickers, big smile on their face. Hey, are you smiling today, he would say. He encouraged his employees to whistle while they work. Everyone should whistle. Everyone should smile. There is no reason, said Z, why, look at the page here. There is no reason, said Z, why we can't be happy while we're working. Everyone should be happy. In addition to that, in all his shops and all his businesses, Z told his managers, you must have an open door policy. If a worker comes to you and has a complaint, I don't like the way I was treated. If a worker comes to you and has a complaint, I don't like the wages that I make. If a worker comes to you and says, you know what, I'm sick of this nonsense, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, he said, have an open door policy. Sit him down and say, I hear you. I hear your complaints. Listen to them. Be respectful, he said. Let your workers talk to you and always listen, said Z. Frequently, Z himself would go to his shop to spread good cheer. He also, in addition to doing all those things, open door policy, urging folks to whistle, smiling, he would seek to empower his workers. We're not going to call them workers. We're going to call them associates. Sounds much better than calling somebody a worker. We'll call you an associate, feeling I got a sense of dignity, I'm somebody, right? You're going to be called an associate. Oftentimes, Z would provide his workers a scholarship. He was making a lot of money to provide a scholarship, so he would provide workers a scholarship so that they could pursue an education. Get a lot of press, people would come in and say, look what Z does. He provides scholarships to his workers. Z would also place around the stores lots of patriotic signs that celebrate the virtues of Civilization X. Z wanted everybody to know that he loved Civilization X. Look at all those patriotic signs, look at all those flags, look at all those blah, 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 blah. So that's thing 4. So last thing 5. By the end of Z's life, he had accomplished what he wanted. His business was tremendously successful. Z and his family were very, very wealthy. And in the years after his death, Z's family only grew wealthier. Z's, as you can see there, within a generation after Z's death, the net worth of Z's family was equal to the net worth of 40% of the entire population of Civilization X. 40% of the entire population of Civilization X. Within a generation after his death, the yearly salary provided to the head of Z's business, so he passed on, somebody else takes over, the yearly salary provided to the head of Z's business was over 1,100 times greater than the average yearly salary provided to one of Z's associates. When he died, many famous people praised Z. They gave him awards, nominations. Many leaders of Civilization X praised Z. A great success story, many said. A true hero, said many others. There were some, however, who were skeptical, to return to the critics. So some said that Z was a crook. Some said Z was a plutocrat. Some said Z was a robber baron. Critics argued that what Z was doing was not fair and was not just. Z and his business, one noted critic argued, are signs of how unjust and unequal our civilization now is. The wealth of Z's family is premised upon the exploitation of thousands. Z had heard all of that before, the good and the bad. When he was asked, when he was approaching his death, he was asked, well, Z, would you have done anything differently? And he said, no, I would have done it all over again. So, there is the story of Civilization X and Person Z. So, here's what I want you to do. Oh, holy cow, we're way over time.
That was my fault, sorry.
So just Sorry, Mr. Hill, I know we're way over time. So just take 1 minute, turn to your next door neighbor. So remember, there is a caveat here, right? The caveat is you don't know who you will be, but you have a button that sits right before you. And you have to say, am I going to hit that button? Do I go into this civilization? You could be a worker in this business. You could be Z. You could be a business manager for Z. You could be a customer who buys from Z. You don't know who you will be. Do you hit the button, yes or no? Take a minute. Right after this. Before we do take a break, before we open it up to questions, I want to get a show of hands. There's no right or wrong answer here. You will not be dropped into an abyss if you answer whatever you answer, right? So just a quick show of hands. Would you press the button? Raise your hand if you press the button.
Yes, I am. Yes.
That's good. Okay, great.
I'd be in that civilization.
Yes.
Is the civilization just Walmart or the store? You still have it out. Low prices, or is it the world?
All right. Would you? So it looked to me like there's a clear minority would press the button. Would you not press the button? Who would not press the button? Clear majority would not press the button. So by not pressing the button, I assert that you have condemned American society today for its inequality. The example that we just mentioned was the example of Walmart. And to those who didn't press the button, I wish you luck. To those who did not press the button, I heartily agree with you, and I endorse your condemnation of American inequality. Thank you very much.